Spring 70 AD. The wind carried the scent of dust and olive trees across the ridgelines of Judea, rustling the tall grasses atop Mount Scopus. From the north, the clinking of armor and the barking of Latin commands echoed through the hills. And then, through the morning mist, it appeared. A glint of iron, a ripple of scarlet banners, and a thunderous procession of thousands. The legions of Rome had arrived. At their head rode Titus Flavius Vespasianus, son of the new emperor and heir to the Flavian dynasty. A man young in years but forged in the fires of rebellion and war. He had not come to negotiate. He had come to extinguish the last great embers of defiance in the east. Before him rose the holy city of Jerusalem, a sprawling ancient bastion perched atop steep ravines, girded by triple walls and crowned by the Temple Mount. Behind those walls waited over 1 million souls, rebels, refugees, zealots, and civilians alike, and Rome had come to crush them.
Rome's entanglement with the land of Judea had never been one of trust or mutual respect. It had always been a tense arrangement, a forced marriage between empire and province. It began in 63 BC, when the armies of Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known as Pompey the Great, stormed through the gates of Jerusalem, putting an end to a bitter civil war between Jewish claimants to the high priesthood. Pompey entered the Holy of Holies in the temple, defiling what was never meant to be seen by Roman eyes. He left the city nominally independent under the Hasmonean dynasty, but Judea's fate had already been sealed. Rome was now its overlord. From that moment, the fate of Judea became tied to the whims of distant emperors and the greed of local collaborators. Puppet kings, most famously Herod the Great, a ruthless but capable Edomite, were appointed to govern in Caesar's name. Herod spent lavishly, building fortresses, ports, and aqueducts, and even expanding the Second Temple into one of the most magnificent structures of its time. But no amount of gold or marble could mask the deep resentment that festered beneath the surface. The Jews were a proud and ancient people, heirs to a faith unlike anything Rome had ever conquered. They had withstood Assyria, Babylon, and Persia, and they had no desire to bow before pagan overlords. Though many elites compromised and aligned themselves with Rome, the countryside seethed with discontent. Bandit rebels, known as sicarii, began assassinating collaborators in broad daylight. Apocalyptic preachers foretold divine deliverance. Messianic hope simmered with every injustice. And injustice came often. In 66 AD, that simmer boiled over. The spark was seemingly small. A Roman officer demanded funds from the temple treasury. But to the people of Jerusalem, it was yet another violation of the sacred. When they protested, the Roman procurator Gessius Florus responded not with diplomacy, but with slaughter. His troops stormed the city, looting markets, violating women, and killing over 3,600 civilians. The temple itself was desecrated. He even mocked the people by parading stolen silver through the streets. Outrage turned to fury. The revolt spread like wildfire. Roman garrisons were wiped out. In Jerusalem, the fortress of Antonia was overrun. In the countryside, the 12th Legion, sent from Caesarea, was ambushed and destroyed in the Battle of Beth Horon, a humiliation that shook the empire. The news reached Nero as his imperial palace echoed with madness and despair. In a rare moment of clarity, the emperor made a wise choice. He sent his best. Vespasian, a no-nonsense general who had clawed his way up from obscurity, took command. Accompanied by his son Titus, the legions descended from Syria like an iron avalanche. They came not just to defeat, but to punish. Over the course of 2 years, the Roman advance was merciless. Cities that resisted were annihilated. Jotapata, Gamla, and Tarichaea fell in quick succession. Tens of thousands were slaughtered, and those captured were either crucified or sold into slavery. Fields were salted, aqueducts destroyed. Resistance was not met with occupation, it was met with obliteration. The horror was such that entire towns surrendered at the mere sight of Roman standards. But even surrender brought no peace. Josephus, the former commander of Galilean forces turned Roman collaborator, wrote bitterly, "They came not as conquerors, but as executioners." In his chronicles, he records that the Jordan River became a messenger of doom, its waters carrying bodies downstream to towns yet untouched, a grisly warning of what was to come. Then, in 68 AD, just as the noose tightened around Jerusalem, the empire itself unraveled. 68 AD came with chaos for Rome. Nero died by his own hand, and Rome plunged into civil war. One emperor rose and fell after another in what came to be known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Vespasian, seeing opportunity in the ashes of imperial succession, marched on Rome and seized the throne in 69 AD. But Jerusalem had not been forgotten. Before departing, Vespasian entrusted command of the campaign to Titus, who now bore not only his father's expectations, but the full weight of Roman vengeance. The order was clear: destroy Jerusalem, root and stem. Yet the city he approached was already tearing itself apart. What the Romans could never have done through politics or siege, the Jews were doing to themselves through pride and paranoia. Factionalism had gripped the city like a fever. The defenders of Jerusalem were not a single army. They were multiple militias, each with their own agenda, their own leadership, and their own bloodlust. The most powerful of these was Simon Bar Giora, a former peasant turned warlord, whose army of 10,000 men and 6,000 Idumean auxiliaries controlled the upper city, including Herod's palace. He ruled as a populist champion, but his brutality rivaled that of any Roman. In the Temple Mount, John of Gishala, once a commander in Galilee, had carved out his own fiefdom. Backed by 6,000 fighters and joined by Eleazar ben Simon, leader of the radical zealots, John laid claim to the spiritual heart of the city. The alliance was uneasy. Distrust ran deep, and ambition ran deeper. Rather than unite against the coming storm, the factions declared war on one another. Streets became battlefields. The temple, once the sacred center of Jewish life, was riddled with arrow holes and bloodstains. Food stores, desperately needed for the siege, were burned by rival factions to starve their enemies into submission. Families cowered behind barricades as armed mobs clashed in the alleys. It was civil war within civil war. As Josephus lamented, no foreign sword had yet pierced their walls, but already their blood flowed like rivers. When Titus reached the outskirts of the city in April 70 AD, he found not a coordinated defense but a burning, wailing, brawling city. The temple walls were black with soot. The third wall had been hastily repaired, but the city's defenders were divided in command, in loyalty, and in purpose. Still, they would fight. Not for unity or survival, but out of sheer desperation. Jerusalem would not surrender, and Rome would show no mercy. Jerusalem was no ordinary city. It stood like a crown upon the Judean highlands, its foundations cradled between steep natural ravines, and its skyline crowned by the sacred brilliance of the Temple Mount. For over 1,000 years, it had withstood siege, betrayal, and conquest, each layer of its fortifications a testament to the faith and defiance of its people. 3 deep valleys carved a natural moat around it. The Kidron Valley to the east, the dark and ominous Gehinnom Valley, later associated with hell itself, wrapping around the west and south, and the Tyropoean Valley slicing through the city's heart. These chasms not only protected the city, but formed its anatomy, dividing its districts and dictating how people moved, worshipped, and fought. Above them, 3 elevated ridges defined the city. The upper city, to the west, was the seat of wealth and influence. Here stood Herodian palaces, marble courtyards, and homes adorned with mosaics and bathhouses. It was where the Sadducees and aristocrats lived, commanding a view of the whole city. The lower city, older and more densely packed, sprawled below, a labyrinth of narrow alleys, stone houses, and bustling markets, home to craftsmen, pilgrims, and the urban poor. To the east, atop its own elevated platform, rose the Temple Mount, Har Habayit. The great Second Temple, a shimmering colossus of white limestone and gilded finery, dominated the skyline. It was not just a sanctuary. It was the heart of Jewish identity, the center of the cosmos, the place where heaven and earth met. The city was girded by 3 concentric walls, each a response to growth and conflict. The first wall enclosed the oldest parts of the city, the upper and lower cities. Its stone foundations stretched back to the days of the Hasmoneans and were reinforced under Herod the Great. Though ancient, it remained formidable. The second wall, constructed as Jerusalem expanded northward, was a strategic response to increasing urban sprawl. It extended protection to the bustling bazaars and new districts, linking the Antonia fortress in the east to the Geneth Gate in the west. The third wall was the most recent, and the most audacious. Commissioned by Herod Agrippa I in 41 AD, its sheer size raised Roman suspicions, and construction was ordered halted. But when the Jewish revolt erupted, the work was resumed with feverish urgency. By the time Titus approached, the wall soared nearly 30 feet high, studded with 90 towers, and equipped with ballistae and catapults captured from Roman forces. Some towers loomed even higher, offering panoramic fields of fire and signaling to Titus that this would be no ordinary siege. Yet beyond the walls, the city's defenses extended into the earth itself. A network of underground passages, carved over centuries, allowed for covert movement, ambushes, and surprise sorties. Hidden entrances and escape routes crisscrossed beneath the streets, fed by vast cisterns and aqueducts that stored enough water to endure for weeks, if not months. But while water could be found, food was another matter. The city, already home to tens of thousands, had swelled with hundreds of thousands of pilgrims who had arrived for Passover, only to be trapped by the oncoming war. The civil conflict between factions had burned granaries, destroyed supply depots, and cut trade routes. What remained was hoarded by militias or consumed in panic. Hunger gnawed at every household. It was a city under siege from within, long before the Romans ever raised a blade. Titus approached Jerusalem in 4 converging columns, a marvel of military coordination across treacherous hill country. The 12th Legion, Fulminata, and 15th Legion Apollinaris advanced along the main northern highway, following the ancient route from Antioch. The 5th Legion Macedonica marched westward through Emmaus, winding through the olive-draped hills and high plateaus. The elite 10th Legion Fretensis, hardened in Syria and known for its discipline, moved in from the east, descending from the Jordan Valley through Jericho, crossing the arid wilderness before ascending to the Mount of Olives. By April 23rd, the legions began to converge. The morning sun crept over the eastern ridges, glinting off helms and armor. Thousands of soldiers, Romans, auxiliaries, and allied levies crested the ridgelines and beheld their prize. Below them lay Jerusalem, scarred by internal war but still defiant. Columns of smoke rose from charred buildings. The temple, impossibly radiant, reflected sunlight like a mirror of the gods. For Titus, it was both an enemy and a monument. For his soldiers, it was a challenge etched in stone. His force, according to estimates, numbered between 60 and 70,000 men, an immense army by the standards of Roman siege warfare. It included 4 legions, the backbone of the force, over 20,000 Roman citizens under heavy arms, 23 cohorts of auxiliaries trained for ranged and irregular warfare, allied cavalry and light infantry, drawn from local client kings eager to prove their loyalty to Rome. Titus wasted no time. He ordered the construction of preliminary camps on Mount Scopus, a high ridge 1 kilometer northeast of the city. The 12th and 15th legions would encamp here, overlooking the northern approaches. A second rear camp was built further up the slope, intended to store supplies and protect the lines of communication. The 10th Legion descended to the Mount of Olives, directly opposite the Temple Mount, facing the eastern walls. Their task would be the hardest, taking the high sanctum, where the most fervent defenders were expected to make their stand. But then Titus, eager to survey the terrain himself, made a costly error. With only 600 cavalry, Titus rode down from the ridge, hoping to scout the third wall firsthand. The land outside the city was deceptively serene. Stone houses, broken fences, olive groves, terraced gardens. But beneath this ruined patchwork lay danger. The ground had been intentionally booby-trapped. Hedges used for cover, ditches concealed by foliage, rubble arranged to channel invaders. It was not countryside, it was a kill zone. Suddenly, a guttural war cry shattered the silence. From the gates of the third wall, hundreds of Jewish fighters poured forth, a whirlwind of slings, spears, and righteous fury. Titus's column was enveloped. Arrows rained down. Men were pulled from their horses and hacked apart in the thickets. Titus, unarmored and unprepared, fought like a man possessed. He grabbed a fallen sword and cut through the swarm, rallying his riders and carving a path to safety. Josephus, who witnessed the event, wrote that the general fought like a lion, his sword never resting, his eyes never wavering. Titus escaped, bloodied, shaken, but alive. The Romans had barely arrived, and already the city had drawn first blood. The defenders, emboldened by their success, struck again. Waves of warriors surged out of the eastern and southern gates, storming across the Kidron Valley toward the 10th Legion's half-finished camp. Roman engineers dropped their tools and ran. Tents were set ablaze. Auxiliary troops were cut down in the trenches. Titus returned with reinforcements, leading a cavalry counterattack into the valley. The first wave was beaten back, but then came a second, and a third. The fighting raged for hours, each side throwing everything they had into the ravine. Steel clashed on stone. Blood soaked the dirt. Only after a desperate, coordinated push did the Romans reclaim the ground and drive the defenders back behind their walls. Titus had learned a lesson. This would not be an easy conquest. He ordered the hillsides cleared of all vegetation. Every tree felled, every hedge raised, every ditch filled. The once beautiful groves around Jerusalem were transformed into barren fields of war. The earth would serve only one purpose now: to bear the weight of siege towers, battering rams, and the might of imperial Rome. The camps were reinforced with trenches and palisades. Night watches were doubled, supply lines were secured, and engineers began drafting the first siege platforms. The siege had truly begun. Rome had come to tear down the city. Jerusalem had sworn to burn with it if needed.